Welcome one more day to space and harmony, an opportunity to tap into divine awareness and feel our true being, the true reality, the tree of life and its primordial origin. And remember that I usually publish these videos in Spanish and English, just in case you have subscribed and click on the bell to receive notifications and you wonder why you receive sometimes videos in Spanish and not in English. It takes some time to make it in English. Usually I publish the English version 1 day or 2 days after, but they go in pairs. And today I'm going to talk about an ancient soul language that has inspired me a lot in order to make sense of the experience as a light being in a human body. And this has to do with remembering spiritual geography, our true human origins in the spiritual celestial earth. It has to do with developing soul senses, deeper awareness, and also the communication with our master guide of light within. At the end of the video, I will show how to connect by means of attention to breathing and heartbeat. I'll give a few keys. And I have to say that many of these things came to my awareness, not by reading books or by thinking, but by going deep into myself by means of contemplation, meditation, self-study, obviously investigating with other seekers and listening to other masters, exploring dreams and visions, especially lucid dreams. I used to jot them down many years ago. However, during my search, I also found inspiring books, and that made me aware of how the ancients knew many keys that we have forgotten. And one of the books that was inspiring to me is known as The Man of Light in Iranian Sufism, written by a French author known as Henri Corbin. And the Voice of Conscience encouraged me to read it over and over again because it answered many questions that I had inside, many visions and experiences that didn't make sense to me, but it seems the ancients in Persia and other places were aware of the soul language. And to me has been so inspiring that I'm going to speak about this today. The author explains the symbolism that is present in most of the spiritual teachings, especially those of an ancient mystic from Iran known as Sohrawardi. He lived in the 12th century, and he had the courage to reveal openly the truth about soul development. He said that by developing the organs of the soul, we can access the spiritual world and be connected to the source of everything, the uncreated lights of true reality. However, saying these things in those days was very dangerous. Actually, the Muslim doctors of the law murdered him, and this is something not new. It happened in Greece with Socrates. It happened, obviously, with the greatest teacher, Yahushua, the Nazarene, in Judea. Even though they didn't kill these masters, they killed their physical bodies. But sometimes they went through very painful tortures, not just the Nazarene, but there was a Kabbalist in Judea known as Rabbi Akiva, and he was skinned alive. I think it was by the Romans. And obviously the Roman Church killed hundreds of masters and carriers of wisdom, and this was from the ancient times, not just from the time of the Inquisition. There was a famous master known as Giordano Bruno, and he was burnt alive by the Inquisition. But leaving aside these historical facts, Let's go deep into the teaching of light that was present in many parts of the world. This has to do with rescuing the human of light which is trapped in a human body in the so-called cities of the oppressors, which is a symbol for this world. In the Gospels is known as the outer darkness. And therefore the man of light within, or the human of light if you wish, needs the help of a true master guide, which is the real self that comes from deeper levels of reality. There is an unfoldment of true self in us. And in this context, we must become very familiar with the spiritual geography surrounding the so-called true north, or spiritual north, something which is more than a poetic language. We'll see it has to do with the qualities of the soul world. And there are even many parallels with regard to the teaching of Yaoshua, as we're going to see. And now to understand the subject, let's consider that just as there is a physical compass with which we can orient ourselves with regard to the physical north and know where we are more or less, there is also a spiritual compass, and this helps us align with the true spiritual north. And this is crucial because today humanity has lost the spiritual north. Humans do not know where they come from, where they are going, what are they doing here. And this is because soul lost a conscious connection with the spiritual place from which humanity came from. Since the fall of the Garden of Eden, humans have lost more and more spiritual senses and have become more and more identified with the world of the carnal senses, the outer darkness, the cities of the oppressors, as they were known in mystic Iranian poetry. So everything we see in this external world is in a state of decay precisely because it lacks the connection with the living soul, the real animation, the reality in which we have the original forms of life, those who have been emanated by the source. They have not been modified or created as in this world, which everything is somehow a composite, even of things that are not compatible. And in true reality, everything is connected to the universal center, the pole, the true axis of reality around which everything spins. And this is why the absence of a true unified self within ourselves is the root of all destruction, distress, confusion, disease, lack of attention. And it does not seem a coincidence that in the book of the Apocalypse, the destroyer is known as Apollyon, which can be read as a lack of a central pole, Apollyon. And the absence of a central pole leads us away from complementary opposites, all of which generates destructive contraries, or the contrary pole, which opposes us from above. And this is a tremendous key of understanding because it's not the same to speak about opposites and contraries. Even Henri Corbin makes this distinction in his book. Contraries are always the destructive darkness and shadows that trap the light. By contrast, the opposites are complementary manifestations that are linked to a center. We can, for instance, understand this by thinking that our manifested soul, the qualities of the soul, are somehow the opposite pole of the invisible self, the witness, which is not seen, but somehow is mirrored on the external manifestation, the soul, which is its opposite. The masculine side would be the invisible, and the feminine is the manifested. And both are complementing each other. And now we can understand why divine communication, divine awareness, is always the interaction between these two poles, opposites. But there is always a unicity, a oneness, a communion that takes place between both. And this is precisely the function of conscience and spiritual vision, which is, as Enrique Corbin says, an active imagination, not passive imagination, which is rather dispersed fantasy. We can say it's Kundalini hallucination, and it only generates disorientation. And we seek the orientation of the true harmonious light, or in ancient languages, even Hebrew. And true light is emanated from an uncreated original source, and therefore they are also uncreated lights, which are known usually as the spiritual north. And in the primordial lights of true reality, there are no contraries. The spiritual geography is very different from physical geography. As Enrique Cockburn says in his book, when we think of the physical east, we are thinking about the place where the sun rises, but then we have the opposite, contrary side, which is where the sun sets. And there is always a contrary opposition between both. However, this does not take place in the spiritual world, where opposites are always one and two at the same time. Is a paradox. In the spiritual east, we have the true north, where there is neither east nor west, as we understand it. And the sun never sets. It's an ever shining sun where night or darkness cannot take place. This is why in the Gospels, I think it's in the book of Revelation, we hear that the sun will not shine anymore. It's not a time, it's an state beyond time, an state of awareness. And when we find ourselves in that state of consciousness, we realize that everything revolves around the true North Pole, the true spiritual North. And once we tap into this divine awareness, we no longer feel as if we were climbing a mountain as we move forward in the spiritual path. We rather feel that we grow from the center and we always come to ourselves. We are already in the north, even though we might feel ourselves on the bottom of the mountain. It's a paradox. And just as there is a manifestation of northern lights, aurora borealis, as they are known, there are also northern lights of the soul, boreal soul lights, we might say. And these reveal our proximity to the true spiritual north within ourselves. And this is a very precise language that has to do with the vibration of our soul. Actually, if you notice, ancient teachings use sapphire and emerald as symbols of spiritual reality. This t-shirt, for instance, has more or less the color of emerald. It's one of my favorite colors, by the way, together with indigo. And these have always been colors related to deeper awareness, deeper vibrations. This is why we hear about the sapphire tablets of Moshe. The book of Revelation, chapter 4, also mentions the emerald rainbow. We also hear about the emerald tablets of Hermes, Hermes Trismegistus. And Hermes is a reference to the human of light within us, which becomes thrice great, Trismegistus, when he breaks the chains of matter by sublimating energy. As prophet Enoch, he elevated the vibration of his body to the vibration of his soul, and he became Hermes Trismegistus, entering the spiritual north. These teachings are, as I said, all over, not just in Aram, but Sohrawardi, the Sufi mystic, called this accessing the eighth climate, which is around the mountain Kaf in the spiritual north. And to me this is fascinating because it's really speaking about an octave of reality, an octave of vibrations which are not the vibrations in this physical, dense world. Obviously, all this was also described as Jacob's ladder, the multicolor mantle of Joseph, and so on. There are many beautiful allegories and descriptions about all this. And the ascension reaches up to the most intense light, which is our deeper self, the radiant being. And this was very beautifully expressed in an ancient Sufi proverb known and used by Sohrawardi and many others. He who knows himself knows his master. The translations usually say his Lord, but Lord has a negative connotation because the Lord relates to his servant or slave, and we are not the slaves of our true self, nor the mere servants. We are expressions of our true self. Even Paul said, "Now I see darkly as through a glass, but I will know as I was known." And this brings me back memories of when I perceive myself emanated from a primordial light source, a memory that accompanies me since childhood. And that led me to the conclusion that our primordial being of light is emanated. It travels through different dimensional planes, the space-time reality, and it eventually links itself to souls that are trapped in human physical bodies. And the true light self comes precisely to rescue these trapped souls, which are experiencing an unnecessary bondage. There is no need to be here suffering over and over again, experiencing the same mistakes even in different lives. Souls didn't come here to learn something. Most of them are trapped. In any case, some of us came to understand, but we already know why we are here. And as our divine self unfolds itself several times, we must also remember ourselves several times. But the spiritual witness that we are on a deeper level knows everything we do or everything we can do, and is completely aware of our potential, the true gifts and true life that we are meant to develop. The tragedy is that we are not usually aware of the divine witness in us. Obviously, we don't even recognize the difference between the spirit witness and the soul witness. A soul witness that can even manifest as another pole in the world of the soul. And we cannot recognize these realities unless we start realizing that we are expressions of the divine soul coming from an invisible source. Reason why we need to listen to the voice of conscience within and remember the language of the soul. Keep in mind that the Divine Master, the invisible universal Father, if you wish, knows himself looking at the mirror of existence, but not the existence that we see here, which is fallen, the divine existence, which is the expression of pure being. And the Holy One sees his essence especially mirrored in the divine human soul, which is basically what Yaoshua manifested. And this soul must grow in us so we can be his image. This is why Yaoshua came to say, "I and the Father are one. Whoever has seen me has seen the Father." Why? Because he was the divine soul, the manifestation of the origin. And Paul repeated that Yeshua was the image of the Father. But most people don't understand that. They think Yeshua or Jesus is somehow an external God, which is the second person of the first God that would be the Father. And this is crazy. This has nothing to do with reality. There is only one person, but it manifests through different expressions. Let's say that the invisible Holy One expresses his I amness of unconditional love and modified life, universal conscience and blissful serenity through a universal divine soul, which is a cosmic interface. And our souls must be its expressions. As the Master said, "I am the true vine and you are the branches." In the same way, the human of light within us expresses himself through a feminine side, which can be considered as the Eve in ourselves, which is basically the life energy, love, longing, even harmonia, beauty, both internal and external. And because of this, someone might even feel the own soul reflected on another soul. Sometimes a single soul can even be manifested through two people and even through more people when a soul group is the expression of one soul. There we find the theme of twin souls and twin flames also, which would be the manifestation of one soul in two people. But this is a complex subject, very rare. In most cases, I think the people who claim to be twin flames or even twin souls are not so. They might have some common qualities with other people, but we all have common qualities. In any case, I think that seeing ourselves mirrored outside might be the reason why those Elohim or natural architects that worked for the divine source put the Adamic soul in the world of opposites so it could be somehow corrected. I'm not saying that was entirely harmonious because there was a threat, the threat of the adversary, which was the species that saw the tares. They were fallen architects that made some vessels in which the Adamic soul came to be incarnated. And that was the problem, because this generated a conflict between the divine opposites of the soul and the flesh, the deception which makes a contrary movement. Spirit and flesh are completely contrary, they are not opposites. They are always in a struggle. What is contrary is not compatible with true light. And as the human of light came to be trapped in fleshy bodies designed by foreign architects, the human of light needs a deeper guidance, the true master of life and light. Otherwise, the being of light becomes Lucifer, the carrier of light, Prometheus in chains, and fallen Eve. And the teachings concerning all this were very well known in ancient times. Enrique Hochbank mentions in his book The Teachings of Zosimus of Panoplis, the alchemist who established a connection between the story of Prometheus and Epimetheus and Adam and Eve. Prometheus is the being of light which is unable to communicate well with his brother Epimetheus, and his brother accepts the deceptive present of Zeus, Pandora, just as Eve fell in the garden because of a lack of communication with Adam. But in both cases, it's because the being of light cannot do anything on his own. He needs a brighter master. This is why in Hermetic teachings, Hermes himself is not the master. He must listen to the perfect nature. Some spoke of the star of the philosopher. And all this was very well expressed in early Christianity. Actually, an essential work was the Sefer of Hermas, which was read by Christians in the first and early second century until the book was banned, especially by those who don't want humans to wake up. And in that book, the shepherd is the divine son who guides Hermas. Hermas, which is another name for Hermes, the man of light within. Anyway, this is a language that somehow conditions us because a shepherd, a pastor, as we say in Spanish, or in religious context, is someone that leads the sheep. And sheep are usually sheared, milked, and eventually slaughtered. And this is not the end of our true soul. The human of light within us is not to be milked or slaughtered. We need guidance, so our true witness, which is comprised of spirit and soul, is not a shepherd, but rather a master, a guiding self, which gives us the force of will and the gift of conscience, which includes active imagination. And sometimes the master in us is like an alarm clock. The witness moves us to integrate our experiences, to ponder certain ideas, to get into contact with someone, all to increase our awareness, increase our consciousness, and find supraconsciousness, which binds up the cracks of our perception. We usually experience a very incomplete sense of reality because our false consciousness bypasses the reality of the unconscious, where true conscience is pulsating. The energies of the flesh are somehow a barrier, but we can move inwards. Superconsciousness unites the opposites in us, making us feel the level of the soul, the level of the spirit, working together, helping the invisible self to witness itself by means of the image, soul, personality, and even through the images of the world, the spiritual world. We can even sense spiritual reality by seeing certain events in this physical world. Synchronicities, for instance, sometimes are the manifestation of relations in the spiritual world that we usually don't perceive. But not all synchronicities are divine manifestations. Some of them are moved by dark threads. We should not forget that everything we experience here are just shadows of an invisible world, and sometimes that invisible world is the dark world. But usually the shadows that we see, the things we perceive, don't exist in themselves, but we make them real with desires that are contrary to our true self, our true living soul. And these fallen desires are usually full of pride, anger, violent reactions, a fallen use of language, and we cannot escape the shadows in ourselves unless we see them as what they really are. We must let them go, stop attaching to all that. And the first contact with divine reality within us is paying attention to the life energy that can even turn itself into anxiety, sadness, frustration, pain. And this is because the lack of self awareness, the lack of complete awareness. There is a frustration because the soul cannot express the truth. And when we do not give life the place it deserves, it gets sick, it gets repressed, and it can even burst with anger. And this is when it can get mixed up with the energy of the serpent, which comes from the vehicles made by the fallen architects, the adversary, the fallen Elohim. And the love of the first Adamic souls, the emotional energy known as Eve, was precisely reversed when coming into contact with the unquenchable desire, the energy of the serpent as it is known, which only seeks external knowledge, data, da'at, not da'at elyon, which is rather an elevated conscience. And the search for external knowledge gives rise to Babel, confusion, and Rome, which is a continuation of Babylon, is the opposite of amor, true love. And this is why the teachings of Rome disguise false love in the shape of a true Messiah, which was rather an anti-Messiah, a false Messiah, in the form of an external God of flesh, which is sacrificed and so on. True reality has never to do with anything external, but false teachings deviate the attention of people towards the world of the senses. And we can say that the external world is an excretion of the fallen Elohim. And this is why the human of light within us can be deceived very easily by means of the emotional energy that is hijacked by these fallen forces. So we must pay great attention to this energy of the soul which is trapped, the fallen Eve within ourselves, because this is what manifests in ourselves as pain, as frustration, the desire for completeness, the desire for expressing the truth, the longing for revelation. And that is precisely the meaning of Eve, Chava in Hebrew. In Psalm 19:2, we read that night reveals wisdom to the night. And the word for reveals here is precisely Hava. And the rulers made the energy of life captive, so she does not tell the truth about what we really are, which is unconditional, infinite love, pure life, pure light, all of which remains hidden. So most of our frustration and the existential suffering comes from the apparent inability to express the truth of what we really are. And most of this is due to the fallen use of language, which was given to us by fallen entities. The external language is not ours. It was given to us by reptiles, by draconian architects. However, some ancient languages are more in tune with true reality. For example, in Spanish, soul is known as alma, which sounds very much like alma, which in Hebrew means maiden, the soul maiden. And in Hebrew, that word can also be read as elem, which means hidden. So the soul remains hidden so long as we don't perceive it. And it's precisely the divine soul what we have to discover in this obscure world. But it's horrible to discover that the word for soul in English sounds almost like the word for the lower part of the shoe, the sole of the shoe. Because in this world, the forces step on the soul and make it prisoner. The soul should be the interface for the divine. We should never allow any force to control the soul. So it's time to become more aware of divine longing within us and turn this longing towards the being of light within us, the awareness, the witnessing consciousness, which can listen to the Master of Life, the greater witness, in whom we are attuned to the whole cosmos. And then we find ourselves and everything as in the spiritual north, aligned with the true pole, the true North Pole, which is the center in everything. And the divine verb, Yud He Vav He, is the movement of unification towards the unity. And the elevation that we feel as we become more aware of this is precisely the unfoldment of our divine soul, the growth of the organs of perception of the soul. And as we approach the understanding of life, we also become more familiar with the boreal nuances, the sapphire, emerald, turquoise of our soul, the midnight sun, the dark light, the black sun, which were ancient metaphors. Light and darkness come together, but it's not the contrary darkness. These were symbols used to express the unification of opposites, not contraries. The soul might seem dark because we cannot perceive it fully, but when we perceive it, then it becomes radiant. So this is the union of dark and light. And as we are more and more guided by the uncreated light and lights of true reality, we move away from the influence of the city of the oppressors, which is this material dark world, the outer darkness, which is ruled by the destructive forces, Apollyon. And it's curious that the Greeks call the sun god Apollo. I think that Apollo can be seen as a false externalized light, the light of Prometheus, a light which is usually repressed and trapped within the physical body. And let's not forget that the sunlight, together with the energy of the moon, the energy of Saturn, and the energy of the earth, form the fourfold matrix in which the souls are trapped. However, a legend says that Apollo, the sun god, visited Hyperborea every winter in order to find rejuvenation. So, what is Hyperborea? Boreas was the name of the north wind, and for the Greeks, Hyperborea was the land beyond some geographical north, but all indicates that Hyperborea is really the spiritual north, the same region to which Sohrawardi and many others were referring to. where the spiritual auroras are coming from, the mansion of the midnight sun. And this is implied in the words of a very ancient poet, Pindar, who said, "Neither by sea nor by land will you find the path that leads to the assembly of the Hyperboreans." And Enrico Ben, in the book I mentioned, The Man of Light, writes that the Hyperboreans symbolize the man whose soul has reached such perfection and harmony that he is free from negativity and shadow. He is neither from the east nor from the west. That's the type of soul that can go back to the source of everything. The prophets and other sages spoke of a heavenly land known by names as True Earth, Urkalia, the land of emerald cities, as they were known by Sohrawardi and other Persian Sufis. Maybe it's what the Celts knew as Avalon, and the heavenly land is usually described as a place where souls are immortal, there is no death, no suffering, no disease. And Plato described this land very well in his dialogue Phaedo. He called it the true earth. And I attest for it because I also remember visiting this plain many years ago during a night vision while my physical body was sleeping. I found myself in a heavenly garden where I saw energetic plants, incredible harmonies coming from a tree, and on my left side there was a silent, wise woman who I interpret as a manifestation of my soul, because in the world of the soul everything comes in opposites. And to me it was very inspiring to read in the book of Corbin that the complete beings of Hyperborea are biunities. They are twins, so to say, inside and outside. Inwardly we are invisible spirits, but outwardly we are soul personalities that can go in pairs, and they come in family actually. And we can think that the union of invisible spirit and manifested soul is what was known in ancient times as the union of Ka and Ba, which gives the Merkaba, the vehicle of the great I Am. However, there are also fallen Merkabas, moved by fallen spirits who fell long ago, and many of them manage to exist in other lower dimensions. There are even underground cities, inner earth cities, and they are inhabited by other beings that are a threat to humanity. They are enemies of humanity. And there is also solid proof that once existed a civilization at the geographical North Pole. Ancient accounts tell of an Arctic civilization that was destroyed by a great catastrophe. And this came to be the origin of many civilizations that share many elements, as well as the fall of spirituality, but I leave all this for another video. For now, let's say that humans have the chance to enter deeper dimensions back again and go beyond time dimensions. Some will even return to the celestial earth, which is beyond time and space. Very likely it's what in Hebrew is known as Tabel, a fruitful land, which to my surprise has a name with a geometric value of 432. And this cipher is a pure harmonic of perfect tuning. The central A is 432 Hz in instruments that are tuned according to the harmonic radius in relation to the unity. So let's understand that attunement is really the key to perceive the soul of reality. And attunement depends on the quality of our consciousness and attention. For example, conscious breathing through the nose helps us absorb solar and planetary substances that are very important for the health of the body and the growth of subtle bodies. But we must remember how to breathe naturally, not with the upper chest, which is a very superficial breathing. Abdominal breathing means that the air goes to the bottom of the lungs, and when we breathe properly, then we have long pauses at the end of exhalations, and this calm us down, helping us find true north. and the absorption of true energies nurtures and strengthens our astral body, which helps us listen to the voice of conscience and to be aware of awareness itself, which is actually the experience of divine unity within ourselves, the experience of our soul and invisible spirit witness. And altogether, all this is the soul vehicle, the Merkaba, which elevates us. And those who master the soul vehicle can go anywhere. So conscious attention to breathing and heartbeat is a way of divine connection. And simply notice how divine love is reflected in both breathing and heartbeat, because without them, we would be physically dead. Let's say that the harmonious Elohim are breathing through us, and they are beating through us. These are the divine forces. Remember that in the videos Cosmocommunication and 13 Spheres of Sensory Awareness, I gave a simple approach to contemplative relaxation and divine awareness. But if you are interested in exploring deeper the art of breathing slowly, I recommend the Buteiko method. It's a very good approach to recover slow breathing, which regulates the body as well, kills bacteria and viruses. I'll surely talk about this more in detail, even in the other channel. And for now, I will write an article with these ideas to publish it in the blog. I will also leave a link to the book of Henri Corbin, The Man of Light in Iranian Sufism. And as always, thank you very much for listening with attention. If this was inspiring to you, please give thumbs up and subscribe to promote the channel. If you wish to receive weekly notifications for the videos in English and Spanish, click on the bell. Feel free to make comments and questions. And keeping in mind the teaching of today, may we be oriented towards the true north, using the spiritual compass of unconditional love, the pure life that can even be felt in our longing for completeness, the voice of conscience, which helps us see and be seen at the same time, and the blissful serenity of our primordial origins.